Hey all of you makers and RPGers out there, Dalen from Learn to Make to Learn. Now I'm just getting back into role-playing games and in particular Dungeons and Dragons, and what I've discovered is I really don't have the time, and I haven't had sort of years to build up a repository of figures, of characters to represent all of the things that are going on in my game, my current campaign. So what I've decided to do is build or make tokens to represent those non-player characters and those monsters while I build and paint and create and print other figures for these adventures. So let's take a quick look at how I built some really, I think, nice but fast and easy character, non-player character, monster tokens for my campaign. So it's always nice to have miniatures. They add a lot to the experience. There's nothing like, putting something like this Grick on the board and having your adventurers, campaigners, party members react to it. It's nice to have hero figures, but the reality is you may not actually want to start painting miniatures. You may not want to make that investment in time. And so having some sort of alternate to that is really helpful. So that's where tokens come in. You can't have a miniature for everything, but sometimes you want to have a representation of either creatures or non-player characters that you can interact with and you can understand where they are in relation to your map or the board. So tokens are where we go to from there. Now, I've made a couple different size tokens. These are about an inch. This larger one, it's about 1.5 inches using these larger wooden discs or wooden chips. I think that these are a little big. Usually you're playing on a 1-inch grid, and this is basically if we were to say an inch is 5 feet, this is taking up a good 7.5 feet of space. And it's just a little unwieldy. The nice thing about this is obviously there's a lot of visibility. You can have nice big art, but it's a little chunky. So what I've gone to are these 1-inch wooden discs. And they're a little bit smaller, but they work really well on the maps. So let's look at how we might make something like this. What we'll need are obviously some of these wooden discs, these little wooden chips, little like poker chips. I will put affiliate links down in the footer for the materials used in this project. Again, no additional cost to you, but I get obviously a little commission on any sales, which helps me continue to make these videos. You will need some glass cabochons. And so these are glass. There's a bunch of different qualities and grades. Some I think are supposedly a little bit more optically clear or less distortion. Some, the way they're packaged, don't have scratches, but glass cabochon, they come in a variety of sizes. You can get them like these larger 1 inch. You can also get really small ones for a variety of projects. You can actually get some pre-printed with eyeballs. So if you needed a bunch of eyes for some reason, or for other model making, these are actually a fun, kind of cool set it's just nice to have these eyeballs all kicking around for weird and random projects. So they come pre-printed sometimes. So wooden chip, cabochon. Now the other thing that you're going to need is some UV resin. So this is primarily for jewelry making. You use it a lot for little jewelry pieces, and this is borrowed from or is part of that sort of jewelry making process. So a little bottle of UV resin, and to really speed up the UV curing process, a cheapy little UV light. You can get away without a UV light by putting these in the sun or in a brightly lit area. The problem with that is we're going to be sort of using it as a glue. And because we're coating it and we're going to push it down, we're creating a slick little film. And if we set it, there is the risk that it's going to creep across the surface of the disc. And so what this is for is you get it where you want it, you sort of position it, and then you zap it with the UV light, and it basically cures instantly. So it allows you to cure the UV resin as very quickly, and you don't have to worry about your piece slipping and sliding around. You could actually just use these chips unfinished, but I've chosen to finish mine, and you can do it in a variety of ways. I've used these clear dyes. These are water-based wood dyes, so they're extremely bright, rich, transparent colors, and those will give you effects like these. So very, very bright colors, transparent, and they can be really cool finishes. They're also cool for other types of projects as well. If this is a little too vibrant, you can use any old regular wood stains. These are some aniline wood stains that I have, alcohol-based, and these are for woodworking. I have just a bunch of these for bigger projects. I've got them in Purple Heart, Padauk, and I think an ebonized walnut. But those will give you much more natural finishes. And you could just use these, you could use regular wood stains, really anything that you want to finish your wood with. You could actually just use watered down acrylic paints and use those, which is what I did for some of these early sort of tests. So this is just a regular green acrylic, just a red acrylic, thinned down and used, out of the bottle. So really, really easy to do. The other thing you're going to need is some sheet of your tokens. Now, there's a lot of ways you can do this. On Roll20, these tokens along the bottom, this is a set that I purchased of hero figures, and I just really like this artist style, his really the way he paints. I'll put a link to, again, this is a non-affiliate link, but I'll put a link to his work down in the description. But I just loved his characters, and so I purchased a token set. A lot of times people will grab artwork off of the interwebs and use those. You got to be, I'm always a little cautious and nervous about, using copyrighted other people's art for things. Obviously I'm not selling anything with these. I'm not repurposing and putting these all on an Etsy shop. But I just am always a little cautious about using other people's artwork for things, especially when it's copyrighted. We need to be sensitive to artists and the time they put into their work. For this project, I'm going to use these pieces that I purchased on Roll20, and so we're going to use them, and so what I'm going to do is first just trim them down to a more manageable size, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay. Now, the basic process is this. You're going to take your wooden disc and you're going to finish it in some fashion. So I could actually stain it, I could paint it with the paints, and then let them dry. You'll end up with something, if you're staining, that looks sort of like this. It's kind of dull and uninteresting. If it is a water-based paint or some sort of an alcohol-based stain, you might find that you're going to raise the grain a little bit on it. So take a very fine piece of sandpaper. It could be in the 320, 200, kind of grit range. Finer is better. You're just literally taking a bit of raised grain off and give it a very light sanding. So if this is my sandpaper, I would just give it a very light sanding. Once that's done, I just use regular old clear gloss spray coating. Like it doesn't matter really, anything that you could find at the local hardware store or the craft store. It could be a Krylon crystal clear. You could actually use a water-based clear finish, something like, you know, a bottle like this of this clear varnish that's water-based. You could use an acrylic varnish, like a painting varnish for artist paints, like a Liquitex. You want to just give it a clear coat, and I ignore the bottoms. I just put these all out and I stack them all out, and then I just hit them with spray. It's going to darken your colors a bit, but it is going to give them a nice gloss finish. You can see this is the unfinished, and that's the spray. It's a little darker, but it gives it a nice glossy finish. Once that's done, you're ready to actually apply your artwork. Now, what you could do is you could just take your cabochon and trace around it if your artwork isn't already to size. So these I have sized in a design tool I use in InDesign. You could use Photoshop, you could use other tools, you could use PowerPoint, you could use Word. If you're interested in you know, a quick demo on how to resize your artwork in free software, I could do a tutorial on how to resize this type of work using GIMP. GIMP is a free open source tool that is for, does a variety of things. But in my case, I pre-sized these in Adobe InDesign because I work with that all of the time. But you could just get some square images. You could, if the image was bigger and your person was here, you could take your cabochon, drop it over, get it where you want, trace around it, and then cut it out. So that would be your easiest and least investment in making your artwork. Now, these are just printed on a regular inkjet printer. They're printed on a heavyweight matte photo paper. I think it needs to be something along the quality of a photo paper. These are pretty small. Print them as high resolution as you can get them. And the matte is probably better than gloss. I don't have any real reason to say that, except I just like the idea of the tooth of the matte for adhering to the cabochon. Now, you could probably do a better job than I did in cutting these out. But you know, I was kind of going fast there. I could probably do a slightly better job, but you know, you're going to be probably making a lot of tokens. If you're making any tokens, you're not just making one. So what I found the best thing to do is to get one of these little guys. These are just big circular punches. They're used for scrapbooking and other crafting, and they come in a variety of sizes: a 1 inch, 3/4 inch, 5/8. Actually, for these cabochons, these are more like 1 1/8. So I would like to see if I could find a 1 1/8. That's maybe it is a thing, maybe it's not. The cool thing about these are you flip them upside down, and you'll see this is why I cut our artwork into strips. You slide it in, position your art where you need it, pop it out. Position my art. Now these have little borders on them, which actually make it kind of harder. It's actually easier with artwork that doesn't have a border because I'm not trying to punch out on that particular design. You can make them a little bit oversized so you don't have to be particularly fussy with them. What other ones did I like that I wanted to do? I liked this purple one. So we'll do a variety of them here. So that is just spectacularly easy to do that. And you can just crank out tokens all day long. Now, these aren't just necessarily something for tokens. These could be really for any other, for games, but you could do little designs, little artwork, and create things, and create jewelry, create magnets. There's actually a lot that you can do with this. Now, once this is done, you need to glue your piece onto your token, your little disc. I'm going to use this one. It's a little shinier. Now, there are a couple ways you can do it. What you can do is, actually, I'm going to do this one on this one. That's a good color. You can just take a little dab of school glue, a little white glue, little Elmer's glue, and you can apply it. I brought a little brush, but I don't want to clean a little brush. Just run that around, smooth that out, and glue your piece down. Now, PVA glue and white glue are designed to, in theory, not curl paper. So you want something that's a paper glue. The reason that they don't curl is they tend to have, relative to the sort of the binder, they have a lower moisture content. So it tends to not curl. So there's fast grab. You could, I would probably not use a glue stick. We'd want something a little bit more durable than a glue stick, but some sort of a white school paper glue. That's one way of doing it. Now, if you're like me and you just can't you can't resist buying things, I use this little guy. This is a tool that's used for scrapbooking. So if you need to put adhesive on a lot of stuff and stick it to paper, this is a really cool little tool for that. And the way that it works is there's a roll inside that has a sticky part and it has a release sheet. And so you basically, I take my creations and they go face up, just drop them down in. Might not be the easiest thing to see, but I'm just dropping them straight in and they sort of slide back along the back edge where the rollers start to meet. At that point, you love it when things don't work. There we go. So it feeds through, and you can see it's going to come out on the other side. There's a little trimmer, and then you end up with your pieces. This little front piece peels off, and it takes with it the excess adhesive. If I can do this. So it peels off the excess adhesive, so there's additional adhesive on this. And now what you have are little stickers. And so I can take this little Dragonborn character. There's one. Got that one there. Can take this little, looks like a tiefling character. There's two. What else do we have here? Maybe this guy could go on this blue. And they just stick right down. I'll save these for later. Okay. So either way works really well. You can just glue them by hand, really simple, or you can use something like the adhesive roller. Okay, now we're on to the fun and final piece, which is adding the cabochons. Now, At this point, you could stop and you could just use the tokens as is. You could give them another coat of clear. But what I found is that, okay, great, but these things are really cool. And so these cabochons, and here's why. They actually act like a bit of a magnifier. And so not only do they make the artwork a little bit bigger, but they also make it so that you're able to see the artwork, and it's kind of hard to see, but from a variety of angles. And so they actually make the artwork a little bit more visible on the table. It's just a cool optical effect. Now, the one thing that's bad about them is they don't stack. So if you're trying to put these in some sort of a, right, this is not working, and it never will, and they will never stack. So, you know, there is a downside. You have to sort of just throw these in a big pile, and they are a little bit bulkier, but they are just a little bit cooler. Now, how do we do this? Very simply. Now, if this starts to get messy, this is a UV resin. So I would say if you're working with this a lot and you're not, you know, I'm going to only be applying a couple here. If you're using it a lot, chances are you're going to get some on your fingers. So with UV resins like this, I would wear gloves. I'm going to be very careful. And like I said, I'm not going to be doing a lot. I'm just going to be doing one or two. And so my chances of getting a lot on my hands are pretty limited. But gloves are always good for working with resins. We're not using a ton. We're just using the tiniest bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to just put one small little drop, one little dot. And then we're going to drop it straight down on our piece. It's going to basically just squish out to the edges. We're going to make sure it's basically where we want it. And then I'm just going to cure it really quickly with the UV light. Doesn't take long. That was just a few seconds and it's already set. At this point, it's done. Going to do that one more time. Just going to put the tiniest little drop. It doesn't take much. This is just a really thin film that will spread out on the piece. Just want to kind of push it down so that it goes out to the edge. You don't want to use too much because then it's going to sort of ooze out all over the edge of the piece. That's where I want it. Hit it with the UV light. Gives it just a couple seconds of it. And it's cured. Done. I have in the past very carefully gone around the edges with the resin again. I'm kind of sort of mixed on whether or not that's a good or bad idea. It's a little messy and it's a little inconsistent. So I would probably, in a perfect world, try to be very, very careful with the application of the resin so that I'm just getting enough to fill that out and adhere it to the piece. Now these could actually sit out maybe in a sunny location for a little bit longer just to make sure that everything's 100% fully cured. But that black light pretty much sets it up very quickly. You obviously need to be very careful with the resin that you're not letting this get exposed, like leave it open with a light shining down in it or anything to start to impact the resin in the bottle. I try and keep it capped so that it's not getting light sort of infiltrating down into it. But that is it. So now I've got two more game tokens. I've got my little tiefling. Actually, I got two tieflings. And I just continue to make them. You can then use these for your gaming. You can use them as non-player characters. You could actually use them for your real characters. It's sort of wide open for you. So that was pretty easy. The nice thing is that a lot of these techniques and materials can be used for a variety of things. Like I said, these don't have to be used for game tokens for RPG role-playing games. They could be used for other board games, games you make up. They could be used as, all sorts of different things, jewelry making. And that UV curing resin is way cool. I am not a person that likes to wait for anything to dry. And so the fact that I can pour some UV resin, hit that with a UV light, and it's cured basically instantly is really it's really just about magic for me. I've used it for things like water in little barrels, and I'm always finding something to use it for. It's very, very cool stuff. So I do hope that you did find some of this helpful. Like I said, I've put some affiliate links down in the description for some of these materials. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, follow me on Instagram. I'm posting lots of pictures to Instagram as much as I possibly can. And as always, it's good to see you back, and we'll see you again really soon.